Radio 1.
Spectrum Extra on Radio 1 FM 90. An extra hour of analysis and discussion on the topical issues of the week. Brought to you by Housing Finance Bank, a financial institution regulated by Bank of Uganda. Housing Finance Bank, we make it easy. Your views, our interviews on Spectrum, Radio 1 FM 90.
A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for joining us for this edition of Spectrum Extra, 2 hours of analysis of the key events of the week. Today, we'll be making sense of the 2024-2025 national budget, but also its speech, which was delivered yesterday. We know very well the figures have been with us for quite some time. It's a 72.130 trillion shilling national budget, up from 52.74 trillion shillings budget. That figure increased suddenly as Parliament was about to appropriate that budget. It's going to be financed by both domestic revenues, which comprises of non-tax oil revenue and local government revenue to the tune of 32 trillion shillings. We'll also have budget support, that's grants and loans, to the tune of 1.4 trillion shillings. There will be domestic borrowing at the tune of 8.9 trillion shillings. There's project support, which is also grants and loans, 9.5 trillion shillings, and a number of other interventions there. We know one of the key issues in that budget is the debt. Debt servicing taking the biggest lion's share in terms of allocation. We are going to spend much more actually paying the debts that we have incurred, and of course that has caused the debate around why we are borrowing and whether we are not in the red lights set out by international standards. The government maintaining that we are still safe and explains deeply the reasons why we are borrowing because of the key infrastructure projects, including the standard gauge railway, which is expected to begin before the end of this year. President Yoweri Museveni addressed the country after the finance minister, Matia Kasaija, did read the budget and explaining the strategy and the figures. The president's major points, he talked about how the economy is growing and the plans to actually grow it tenfold. He talked about the key areas of focus, which will include knowledge economy, agriculture, in terms of agro-based industrialization, tourism, and also the services sector. He says once those issues are actually followed clearly, the economy of Uganda will be unstoppable. He said the key challenges the country has been facing have already been addressed. There is adequate electricity. The private sector is the engine of transformation, and it will be getting what he called cheaper credit going forward. He also said the money is in PDM, MUGA, and UDB for those interested in wealth creation. He said labor is cheap, not expensive, and they are going to reactivate railway and water transport for cargo. Then they repair the old railway. The repair of the old railway system is actually underway, and the standard gauge railway will be constructed, as already explained, to be able to address the cost of production, pipeline for petroleum products, introducing electric cars and vehicles, irrigation for agriculture, and he said we need to move beyond talking to in order to sustain the sector. The president talked about proper utilization of the oil money, which is expected towards the end, which is already in, but a lot more is expected when it starts producing at the end of next year. And of course, he talked about jobs being created through hundreds of factories that have cropped up in different parts of the country. One of the major issues was corruption. He actually said he will deal with it decisively, and he said those that are involved in corruption are actually betraying the heroes, the people who died to liberate this country. So we'll be making sense of this budget and also picking the views of different stakeholders that are on the panel today. Let me introduce the panelists. Ms. Angella Kasule, she's the Executive Director at the Initiative for Social and Economic Rights. They are members of the Civil Society Budget Advocates Group, where she is also a board member. Good evening, and thank you very much for joining us on Spectrum Extra.
Good evening, listeners.
Thank you very much for making time to be with us. Dr. John Kakungulu Walugembe, Economist and Executive Director at the Federation of Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises of Uganda. Good evening, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening, viewers. It's always a pleasure to be here on Radio 1.
Mr. Japheth Chiko Kawanguzi, Team Leader at the Innovation Village. They are trailblazers in innovations and the knowledge economy. Good evening, and thank you very much for joining us this evening on Spectrum Extra.
Good evening, everyone. I'm very excited to be here.
We expect a fourth panelist. When he gets here, I will introduce him. And of course, my name is Kenneth Lukwagandason, your host. Mr. Kawanguzi, I've been with you here for quite some time on these issues of the national budget, and at one point you actually said the speech will set the pace on how this budget will perform. So we had a speech from the minister, but we also had a speech from President Yoweri Museveni. Let's get your initial thoughts even before we go deeper into the implications.
No, the president's thoughts are clear and are consistent, and he's been talking about the four services, the four sectors that he thinks are critical to Uganda's takeoff, namely agriculture, manufacturing, ICT, and other service sector. So from that perspective, therefore, I think the president has been fairly consistent in where he thinks focus should be. Similarly, the budget didn't deviate much from what we expected. For starters, the theme remained the same: full monetization of Uganda's economy through commercial agriculture, industrialization, expanding and broadening services, digital transformation, and market access. So the theme remained the same. I think, as you mentioned, what was different in this year's budget was the process. The fact that at the very last minute you had this corrigenda come in and the budget rise by 14 trillion. I think for me this makes, in many ways, makes the process look uncredible, and to a certain extent also makes us wonder, how is this money going to be raised? Of course, in there, we expect to collect that 1 trillion through domestic revenue. We expect to borrow. We expect to roll over debt. So it means that this is a very debt-dependent kind of budget. And we are on the road, on the slippery road to debt distress and default. Government says, no, we are in a comfortable place. I do not think so. We actually had a meeting this morning at PSST. On this particular issue, I think we are doing very badly, and we need to avoid the road that other countries like Zambia, like Kenya, like Ghana have taken.
All right. We'll be coming back to dig deeper. Let's hear from you, Angella, your initial thoughts about the budget, but also the speech as delivered yesterday.
Yes, like you have rightly said that we've had these figures for some time. But for me, in listening to the president's speech, but also to while listening to the Minister of Finance, Honorable Kasaija, I got this feeling that probably they had some kind of morning devotion before coming for this event to come, and paint this picture of hope. And I was actually joking with my colleagues this morning that if as a Ugandan living somewhere, probably in Botswana or in Europe, and I didn't know what was happening, and I hear all these glamorous things they're telling us, economy has grown by 6%, GDP is 202 trillion, the per capita income. I mean, and also the president talking about how he's going to fight corruption, that he's been using soft methods, but it's going to be different now. But also the other thing that was so particular about his speech, the way he delivered the message around debt, like he said, I'm going to make the moneylenders irrelevant, and I do not believe in borrowing. We have to cut our coat according to the size of the cloth. And for me, in listening to that, but also the consistent reference to human capital development, talking about health, education, decent standard of living, hearing all that, I thought it was so glamorous, and, you would expect that really we are in good hands and things are going to be very well. But the particular comment around, I do not believe in borrowing, we are going to make moneylenders irrelevant, and yet signals from the budget indicate that we are going to acquire more debt, because what we can only raise is 31.9 from our revenue collection, and you have 72.1 trillion. So basically 40 trillion is going to come from internal and external borrowing. And then you say, I do not believe in borrowing, I want to make money. So I see a challenge there, but the figures that were given were really glamorous, and we'll be able to make sense of those figures.
All right. Let's hear from Mr. Kawanguzi. Yeah, your initial thoughts on the budget?
Yeah, I think I'm really optimistic. Maybe because of the entrepreneurial bug in me that is pushed to see solutions. And I've been listening keenly to the president, not even just from yesterday, and his emphasis about where we should be looking as a country. So I'm optimistic. If you look at the particular sector in which a lot of the young people I work with in science, technology, innovation, we see that the budget was doubled, from 190 to 390, indicating a trajectory or a projection of where we should be focusing. Now, from the vantage point of where we are, whereas that is the trajectory or the intention, we all know budget projections. So the key question that we now have to double down on is how do we realize these opportunities, this potential, but also more importantly for me, and because I work with so many young entrepreneurs, how do we make them part of this conversation? Because at the moment there is no clear strategy to bring them on top of the table, as part of the table, to say here is the role they can play in shaping up these opportunities. But I'm extremely optimistic about
All right. Well, I don't know even where we should begin from. Maybe we should begin by dealing with the good. What was good in this budget? And I'll come to Dr. Walugembe. The good in this budget. What did you listen to, or what have you been following that you think really?
What was
really
said in the budget that I felt
very good,
okay. Irrespective of whether I believe it or not, but what was okay?
Yeah,
good. Okay, I'll start by saying, first of all, the minister started by painting a picture of economic performance, and the picture was quite good. He said that GDP growth is expected to be 6%, and next year they're expecting it to be at 7%.
So the
and
economy
stated
has
that
rebounded.
Economy has rebounded, and has the COVID-19 pandemic and all the weaknesses that our economy has encountered are behind us. And then he went deeper. He talked about the growth in different sectors. I found that the services sector grew by 6.6%, the agricultural sector by 5.1%, industry by 5.8%. So what he showed therefore is that the economy has recovered, and he gave reasons why that is so. He talked about low inflation, and it's true. Central Bank has taken a very strict monetary policy that has kept inflation low. It has its disadvantages, but there's no doubt that inflation is low, 3.2% average. He talked about the increased investments in oil and gas. He talked about increased exports and so on. The other good thing was around the lending rates. He said that the commercial lending rates have reduced to 17.7% in April 2024 compared to 19.2%, which is good. He also showed that private sector credit has grown to 21.54 trillion from 20.47 trillion. External trade, we are seeing a growth in our exports. We are seeing growth in exports to the EAC. But I think the impressive thing is that we are almost exporting as much to our Comesa region as we have done to the EAC. This is very, very impressive, because what has happened is that traditionally we've tended to export to the region. But if we are starting to export further out, so I think that is a good thing. And also you might recall that for the first time ever, we had a trade surplus with the EU this year. So what we are seeing is that over time we are starting to do better in the export space. He talked about employment. I cannot vouch for the employment figures that were shared, because if I add them up, if I just added up what was presented, every young person would be employed.
But
just looking at
even the president talked about job creation through factories that are cropping up in different
it's
parts
true,
of the country.
but if you add up the figures
Over
that they
8,000
presented,
jobs created.
No, if you add up all the figures of the jobs, like Emuga here, they say 378,640 jobs. They say PDM has already created 1.165 million, and then Youth Livelihood 23,000 jobs. So if you add all these, at some point you'll find that at this rate, we are going to eliminate unemployment soon. I'm not saying they are correct or incorrect. Right. I'm simply saying what the issue is. Now, the other positive in this budget is the money that they've given to support the growth of enterprise. We are talking about the parish development model, the 1 trillion that was allocated. We're talking about the 55 trillion that was given to UDB. We're talking about the 30 trillion that was given for the agricultural credit facility. We're talking about the 100 billion that was given for the Myoga scheme. These are very important because they help to catalyze demand. This money ultimately ends up in the hands of business owners. Whether you get the money directly or not, ultimately it spurs the economy and it benefits small businesses. So
you're not concerned about how that money is actually being utilized,
because talk about the good. I cannot be talking about the good. If you're talking about heaven, you cannot mix it with hell. Today we're talking about the good.
Disclaimer was when I believed it was.
All right, let's go to Mr. Kawanguzi. Let's begin with the performance of the economy. Like Dr. Walugembe has unpacked for us some of the positives. The economy has rebounded. Apparently, we have been able to shake off the effects of COVID-19. Job creation. You work largely with young people. And also the fact that they are projecting the economy to grow by 7%. When you sit in your office there, do you feel the growth of the economy?
I think that's where the gap is, and I like how he was talking about the good, and you could see he doesn't really believe the good.
Well,
but the economy growing.
We'll hear from him shortly.
At the 6%, that may be at a macro level, high level, and you're able to track the growth and the performance at that level. We sit at the micro level where the everyday person, the young person who has just graduated, who's trying to build a business, a startup, and is not able to access whether it's the funds or the resources they need, and there's still a big gap at that level of access. So, for example, if you look at the amount of uptake of support funds that was put in place, 184 billion, but 100 billion we were able to access only about 18. It means that even when you put in place a bucket and say this is what is available for MSMEs, for entrepreneurs, for young people, there might be a big gap on the qualification criteria to be able to access. So it's available. Access to finance doesn't mean that a young boy on the street or a young entrepreneur or an SME can actually go in to get access to that. I think so. The big gap that needs to be closed is how do we bring in this generation into this aspiration and tap into these opportunities. Because whereas the projection and the direction is admirable, we don't see a very deliberate approach of how we include, the everyday young person on the streets, who are the majority, into participating in these various initiatives. Now, from the context of how we work, and if you look at all the funds that are available, an entrepreneur typically doesn't just need capital. Because if you give me money, but the policy environment in which I'm operating in is struggling, then it's not really going to help. My business will still, struggle. If you give me money and you don't help me get access to market, then we'll still see limited success in the aspiration, even with the money that are available. It's easy to assume that it's only the money, but it's more of an ecosystem play or a series of interventions that need to be coordinated to make sure that the aspirations meet people at the need or at the level of need where they are.
All right. So you still believe that this growth is not being felt?
The growth is not being felt on the ground.
How do we make sure that it's felt?
So I think it's looking at the design of the initiatives. And the reason I said I'm optimistic is the plan is good. It's growth, right? But how it is then translated into everyday action, that's where the
problem
is. And I think if you look at how we're looking at government, I think I'm past that level of looking at it, only for the answers, but also for how we can, participate to solve the problems, because we all need to be solving for unemployment.
All right.
So that the clarity for the private, how does the private sector play in engaging, whether it's across the budget, is something that needs to be looked into.
All right. Spectrum Extra on Radio 1 FM 90. Keep your comments coming on the WhatsApp line, which is 0703 090 090. We're going to go for a short break. When we return, we'll hear from Miss Angella Kasule, Nawowe, the Executive Director of ISA, giving her perspective on the economy. One of the things this initiative actually does is advocate for social and economic rights. Are the people actually feeling the economy in their pockets as we talk budget? Stay tuned, Radio 1 FM 90. We'll continue after this break.
Spectrum Extra, Fridays 7 to 9 p.m. on Radio 1 FM 90.
Well, thank you so much for staying with us on Spectrum Extra, live on Radio 1 FM 90. We're broadcasting from the Central Building, the home of this radio station, along the Store Street here in the heart of our city, Kampala. But we're also on our website, which is www.radio1fm90.com. Live on DSTV, audio channel 897. And we are also live on the different radio listening apps, which can be obtained from the Google stores of your smartphone. Our topic of discussion today, we are making sense of the 2024-2025 national budget, but also the speech which was delivered yesterday by the Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development, and also followed by a deeper explanation by President Yoweri Museveni. Ms. Angella, let's hear from you on the issue of the performance of the economy. Your colleagues here seem not to be having faith in the numbers which were shared by the minister.
No, we've shared good numbers.
What was your view?
Thank you. For me, in looking at this budget, we do work with communities. We are human rights advocates. And the rights that we work on, we want people to live in dignity. So when I'm looking at this budget, or when the Initiative for Social and Economic Rights is looking at this budget, we want to think about a father in a Omoro district who cannot afford school fees for his children because of crop failures due to extended drought. We know that in those areas, people pay cash, but also have options to take, say, food items to school in lieu of cash. So you can take beans, you can take maize flour. So that father, is he able to pay school fees for his children? I think about a mother in Buikwe district who is detained in a private partnership hospital because she ended up there to give birth because there is no public alternative in her area. So when you're a mother, I know all of you have mothers, you have sisters, you have daughters. When you're pregnant, you don't know when you're going to get an emergency. But when your income is low, when you get an emergency, you will just end up at the nearest facility. So we have mothers. So if you are a mother and you're ending up at a private facility to give birth and you're detained because you cannot afford the costs of that care, I want to look at the budget that way. But I also want to look at an older person who is receiving SAGE, the money that government gives to older persons, the 25,000 shillings per month. And in the budget, you have indirect taxes and the impact of those indirect taxes, because that old person who is getting 25,000 shillings a month is going to buy a bar of soap from the same facility where probably her area MP is going to buy soap. And there is a difference in income. So when you have indirect taxes, how do they impact the most vulnerable? But also I want to look at a 12-year-old boy who is in primary 7 now, but is not sure whether he's going to be able to sit for his primary living examinations because he has a school fees balance at school. We also want to look at this budget from the perspective that there is a family that is right now fundraising to take their child to India for a heart transplant because they do not have the privilege of tapping into government treatment abroad, which money is actually taxpayers' money. So in looking at this budget, for me, I want to look at from that lens. And just to give you something, you were asking us, like, what is good? I have seen that some monies have been allocated towards access to education, for example. There is 4 billion shillings for 38 primary schools that are implementing universal primary education. There is another 11.28 billion for secondary schools that are implementing universal secondary education. But also there is 14.3 billion for renovating and expanding facilities in 36 secondary schools. But I'll tell you that much as that is the status quo, there is that allocation, it all falls short of the targets by the Ministry of Education, by the Education Sub-Program, what they had planned. So I don't know how we are going to be able to deliver access to education. The budget, for instance, doesn't talk about the National Health Insurance Scheme, and we know how much we pay from our pockets to be able to afford health care. So for me, I would want to look at the budget from the lens. What does it say about education? What does it say about healthcare? When the president was speaking, when the minister was speaking, there is consistent reference to, human capital development, health, education. But when you go into there, what is available for us as citizens? You talk about infrastructure, these big infrastructure projects that are taking a huge part of the budget, but you're shortchanging economic and social rights. I mean, when I'm sick, I'm not going to wait for a road, for heaven's sake.
But you need that road probably to go to the hospital faster. But
we also have elephant projects that are taking a huge part of the budget. We all know about Lubowa and how much money is going into Lubowa. But we have immediate needs that could have been fixed at Mulago Hospital. So for us, we look at the budget from that lens, and we want to interrogate what is it for that 12-year-old boy who is not sure he's going to be able to seek PLE because of the school fees balance, because there is no adequate investment in public education. And because there is no that adequate investment, you have private actors, and even in government schools that are charging fees that are prohibitive. And government statistics, government data, Uganda Bureau of Statistics has told us that 6 out of every 10 people that drop out of school, it is because of school charges. So, what message does it send to that person?
I don't know. Tell us.
So, for me, I would want to see us getting very serious around allocations for those sectors, the way they talk about them. Like, if you say you're into human capital, what investment are you doing? I'll give you an example. Just this week, we launched a report with Human Rights Watch around access to pre-primary. Because we see pre-primary as the foundation of learning, long life learning, and the benefits are enormous. And there is no government provision at all. It is all private sector led. But research, we've done research. UNICEF has done research. UNESCO has done research. IMF has figures. The World Bank has figures that show that this is a good investment. And actually, when you look at the cost-benefit analysis done by UNICEF, it shows that for every shilling invested in pre-primary, you can get back 16 in return. So we have to start looking at these things as investment. And usually when we are doing this advocacy, we get questions. Where do you think government is going to get this money? And for us interrogating this, we see a lot of efficiency that is happening in the system. That just the cost of rolling out public funded pre-primary, which many people call nursery, you would already realize 90% of that cost through the repetitions that happen within the system, through the overcrowding, because many parents are now taking their children to P1 before they are 6 years. So you have 4-year-olds, you have 5-year-olds in P1, and you have, these overcrowded classes, they remain in the system. And many questions you always ask as journalists when the Minister of Education releases the results, that you in the system, you enrolled these many kids in primary 1. How come the figures you're reading are short? Where are those kids? They are stuck in the system because many of them got in when they were not ready, they were not prepared. Others have dropped out, they are in child labor. 16th June is the Day of the African Child, and we are grappling with child labor. And why are kids going into that is because of the environment that we have created. We have not looked at, education as an investment that can yield a lot of results for us. So where do you going to get a competent workforce when what you're churning out is half-baked? But we have to look at the foundation first. And that foundation is pre-primary, but there is no government support for it. And it's even in the law, because when you look at the Education Act, Section 10, subsection 2, it says that financing is for the parents and guardians, and then the provision is by private providers. So as long as there is no that government funding for that, the result you're going to get is that you have many systemic challenges, but also your human capital development that you're looking at is not going to be good. And we have countries that have done this. I'm glad to tell you that we have countries as poor as Sierra Leone that are offering now 1 year of pre-primary, but their GDP is just half of what Uganda's GDP is.
All right. Well, Angella raises the issue of how we are allocating our resources, and I'll be coming to you, Dr. Kakungulu. But let me first introduce our fourth panelist, the Honorable Godfrey Kabbyanga Baluku, the State Minister in charge of National Guidance, Government of the Republic of Uganda. Thank you very much for making time to join us on this discussion.
Thank you very much, Kenneth, and good evening, listeners.
Well, shortly we'll be coming to you, but let's hear from Dr. Kakungulu. Angella raises the issues of thinking through the priorities. Even as we have a budget of 72 trillion shillings, when you look at the speech, you look at the allocations, have we really thought very hard about the issues that will help us to get to that tenfold growing of the economy, but also sustaining it in the long run? Because things that she talks about, like human capital development, are very critical if we are going to have an economy that ticks.
Okay, so first of all, I wouldn't even, if I were the one and I see Ugandans focusing very much on the budget, a budget is like a wish list, which you can choose to follow or not. And in our case, we've shown that we don't follow it consistently.
That should be at an individual level, not at the level of a government that is taking care of millions of people.
Government does not follow the budget. There is no evidence. There's no budget that government has ever followed. If you look at the previous budget, government, shortly before this one, before the financial year ended, government brought a supplementary budget, as you know. So we are talking about these things, but we need to focus more on the implementation and the execution. And His Excellency the President talked about a cartel. I know that at budget reading he didn't raise the cartel issue again, but he mentioned a cartel that is really using the budget. It's almost like they are using the budget itself.
So the priorities.
I'm coming. They're using the budget itself to push their own agenda. So before we focus on the priorities, we also need to say, if the budget is captured, and I say 10 trillion has been allocated to human capital development, and 30% will not reach, it means that there's already a distortion there. So going to the priorities, I would say, overall the priorities are good and are consistent. First of all, they allocated 10 trillion towards human capital development. There's no country that can develop without focusing on and building a strong human resource that is educated, that is healthy. So the fact that most of the money has been allocated to human capital development is important and is right. Number two, 9 trillion was allocated towards security and governance. And in there, our security personnel are going to receive a salary raise of 25%. Actually, this is not just for the security personnel, it's for all of us, because once those people receive this salary raise, they are going to spend, and our businesses will benefit. So I think that's a good priority. Roads and infrastructure, 4.9 trillion shillings. That is correct as well. We need good infrastructure, especially in Kampala, and I'm happy that Kampala has prioritized this time. Wealth creation initiatives, what I've talked about, PDM, Myoga, UDB, and so on, have been allocated 2.6 trillion as a whole. Then electricity transmission, natural disasters, international commitments, agriculture has received an allocation of 1.8 trillion. So I'd say overall, it's ICT, and I saw the Minister of ICT complaining, saying ICT is important, they don't take us as important, our budget has been cut. So I want to really, the main minister was really complaining about this. And I want to say that, on one hand, if you're talking about digital transformation, because the theme itself prioritizes digital transformation. Now, if we are prioritizing digital transformation, it means we need to allocate money. We need to put our money where our mouth is. And I would say, number one, under that, we need to ensure that there is digital literacy. Because all these programs you're introducing, whether it's IFRIS and so on, why were the people striking over IFRIS? It was the solution. They were even calling it a tax because of digital illiteracy. See, so I would say that if I were to change things, I would do this. There's some money that has been allocated under science. In fact, I want us to focus on science, technology, and innovation. I am not happy with the allocations in this sector, and I'm happy to take a deep dive to explain why I'm not happy. I'm not opposed to science because I'm a scientist myself, but the allocations to some of these things, in my view, the intentions may be good, but the amounts, in my view, in my cases, some things I consider them dubious. So 728 billion today, farmer, I would put in digital transformation. I would give the Ministry of ICT, for instance. So anyway, that's the allocation. Overall, the priorities are correct. My opposition is to, in one, the small amount that has been given to this sector of ICT and transformation, and excessive amounts that have been put under science, technology, and innovation. Right. What is being allocated for money under science and innovation, I don't think is what we want to see under this kind of thing.
All right. Let's hear from the Honorable Minister. You've had an opportunity to hear what your colleagues on this table are actually saying. The budget, the figures are good, but they do not have faith in some of the things that are being said. Even
we have faith.
You
know,
don't
put words in our mouth.
Are you fearing him now?
Don't say I'm not fearing.
Don't say that because the minister is here.
I didn't have faith in the performance figures, but in the, whether 10 billion has been allocated to one capital boom, that's okay. We have faith.
All right. You have faith that the money has been allocated, but they do not have faith in the execution of the budget.
Correct.
The budget is likely to fail because they do not think you actually do budgeting and even implementation the right way. What's the feeling out there in cabinet amongst your colleagues when it comes to these issues of a budget? Is it just a mere ritual, or the government of Uganda is actually serious to implement some of these good things that are actually read out in the speech?
First of all, the government of Uganda is serious and very determined to implement this. But just as my colleague has just said, these are budget estimates. And then the budget, whether at individual level or not, is a wish. Let me tell you this. Because for us here...
Shouldn't they be having wishes?
Let me tell you. Because now, all of us are now looking at the expenditure side. We are looking at the budget in terms of what? Expenditure. But we should, when we are looking at the budget, we should look at both expenditure and income. Are you getting me? But normally, everybody who is talking now, I've been now on talk shows, I've listened, because the whole day I am listening, and everybody is talking about the allocations by the minister.
You see, Honorable Minister.
But we are not looking at the income what? The income side.
We are going to talk about the income side.
We have strong views on that.
That's why I'm saying I'm trying to support my colleague, what he's saying. Whatever budget, whether it is for a funeral, whether it is for a wedding, every budget estimate is a wish. That if things are good, this is how we are going to do what? To spend. But sometimes things don't turn up like that. Like the other time, we were there, then COVID came and disrupted everything. So anything can do what? Can happen. But so far, I think what the Minister of Finance has done so far is so good. If you look at the allocation, they are really good. Because he has looked at strategic areas which probably can boost production, and obviously that one will lead to more tax. Yes. So when you look at the money he has put in, at least he has put money in roads. He has now put money in energy.
If things are good.
If things are good.
You see, that's where the issue is.
He has put money in roads, he has put money in energy.
He has promised to put money.
Yes,
That's the language you should use by the explanation you gave.
He has promised to put money
Very good.
in roads, in energy, and agro industrialization, which is so good. And obviously he has put money in PDM.
Yes.
That one, because here I'm also listening to people. What is going to the local person? Because that has been also another question. What is there that is going to the local person? And what's going to the local person probably will be PDM, will be Emioga, will be the youth fund, will be women empowerment, will be GROW. All those are directly going to the local person. But also these other allocations are indirectly going to the local person. Because if you are giving money to PDM to boost production, after that, are these products going to reach the market? You must have good roads. You must have good roads. And we are also looking at PDM. This money which has been given, which is reflected here, is for only one pillar in PDM, financial inclusion. But you should know that under roads, we also have infrastructure. Like when we gave 1 billion shillings per district and per municipality, that one was also PDM. But this time it was going to the pillar of infrastructure. When they give money to ICT, we are going now into, because some of the money will go into purchase of computers and whatever, because every parish must have a what? Must be networked. And that one will assist us to boost the parish model management information system. This expansion of infrastructure under the national backbone, for instance, internet backbone, we are looking at taking internet in the whole country. And under the UDA project of World Bank, we are also looking at taking that internet now to the parish. And all those are indirect investments that will boost what is taking place in all those villages.
Try to explain how will that help a common person on the ground, extending internet to the parish level? Give us an explanation there. Should it be a priority now for Uganda,
yes,
amidst all the challenges?
We have already given money to a parish circle, and the whole of PDM is driven by a system, which is Parish Model Management Information System. Even monitoring and evaluation is run on that on that system. Because we are trying to seal leakages. So that even me myself, when I'm in my office, I will go to my dashboard and see how the parish is performing. And that one will help us. So that people don't misuse, first of all, the money under PDM. It will also assist us to see whether the people who were supposed to get that money indeed got that money. But people don't look at it. They think digital transformation is about the people who are sophisticated. No, even the other local person. If someone gives you, if we have said, give the household 1 million, and I find out that this household was given 700,000, I have to find out where does the 300,000 go. You know, that's how all these things work. Two, this world is going digital. That's why in our roadmap, the digital roadmap, we have emphasized digital skilling and literacy. And that's where this man is. Because he's even assisting agriculturists. Because everything now is going digital. Even for people who you may think are not educated like farmers, they have someone who can tell them that, you know, this season will not have enough rains. Going internet, you'll check and see. So all those are things which might not indirectly put money in the pocket of the local person, but indirectly they will assist. Then energy, I was happy with the investment in energy. The only thing which I'm praying is it should translate in reduction of what? Of tariffs. Because here, the biggest problem we have in this country now, as far as manufacturing is concerned, is the cost of what? Electricity. Compared to our neighbors. It's very high.
Strange enough,
and you know,
yet we export electricity to some of these neighbors.
And it goes into the cost of production. So that the products which you produce, the prices are what? The cost is high. So when the president is talking about import substitution, export promotion, we can't compete because our prices are a bit what? A bit high. So this investment in energy, I pray that it can translate into reduction of what?
Tariffs.
Of tariffs. So
and
that
the cost of production.
and the cost of production, so that we can produce at a competitive level. And once we do that, then it will be okay.
All right, Spectrum Extra on Radio 1 FM 90. We're going to go for a break. When we return, we'll look at a little bit of the knowledge economy, but there are so many other things that we need to talk about. The minister challenged us that we have not been able to talk on the side of the incomes. Can there be incomes without substantial investment into the economy, into the sectors of the economy that can actually trigger growth so that we can earn more? Now, stay tuned to Radio 1 FM 90. Spectrum Extra will continue after this break.
Spectrum Extra, Fridays 7 to 9 p.m. on Radio 1 FM 90.
Thank you so much for staying with us on Spectrum Extra live on Radio 1 FM 90, and thank you so much for listening to us and contributing to this discussion. Already I have a number of comments that are coming in. I'll read some of them out. I'll begin with Candin Ben, who writes and says, "Good evening, Spectrum Extra. Our budget is always good on paper, but when it comes to liquid cash, it ends up in tears, like now in Parliament and other government departments. That is just rubbish, facilitating corrupt government officials." Then we have a comment from Richard. "The budgeting of government is a ceremonial ritual. It starts from the unrealistic amount of 72 trillion. That speaks volumes. It's attainable. Is it attainable, 72 trillion? If your answer is no to 72 trillion, then tell us. Then that tells us that budgeting is a hoax. Secondly, the scam and fraud in the budgeting process reflects thuggery and lack of relevance. Anderson, from the moment the act and word corrigenda was introduced in the last minute, that showed total crisis in our country. We have another comment. Budget reading has become just a ritual that's read every year because whatever is done has no impact. That's a comment from Ariko. We have another comment coming in from Okoth Charles, who said, "I'm happy that so-called budget committee members of parliament accumulate a lot of wealth that in turn they use to bribe voters in the name of offering services. One former MP destroyed our gardens here in Tororo without our consent, while constructing roads with stolen money. I'm happy he failed properly." That's a comment from Okoth there. We'll keep on reflecting on more comments that will come our way. But a little bit focus on the issue of the knowledge economy, because it has been identified as one of the key sectors that will take us to the next level. That you, as a key player in that sector, Mr. Japheth Chiko Kawanguzi, do you think this sector is being handled well? And like Dr. Walugembe said, these resources that are being placed in that particular sector, given the background and the questions we have had on the issues of science and technology in this country, are you confident that it's going to unlock your potential?
Yeah, interesting question. I'm happy I'm seated next to my minister. He's very accessible to us. There's a statesman who said that
I hope you don't fear to speak your mind.
No. He said that the 9 most terrifying words in the English language. I am from government and I'm here to help.
Most terrifying.
But I think I was listening keenly to the Honorable, and where we're coming from, especially in the knowledge economy and technology, ICT, is coming from the part of if things are good. That's where we need to double click on, because if you look at the country, we are a young population. The kids who are leaving universities, they are not able to graduate. They graduate, but they are not able to find the jobs they're looking for. Those who end up in entrepreneurship or startups don't end up there because it's what they want to do, but it's because they don't necessarily have a job. So there's a bulging population that can either be good or can be dangerous. And in technology, we have what we look at as we call it a double-sided market, meaning that if you look at the budget, if things are good, these are the intentions that we will bring to life. So that's like the supply. On the demand side, where the young people are, on the demand side, where the entrepreneurs are, how do we involve them in the process to make sure that things actually become good? Because we're not just going to be on the receiving side. We also want to participate in nation building. We want to build solutions. That's what entrepreneurs do. We see problems across sectors, and we begin to build solutions that can actually solve those problems. Technology is defined by that we use words like faster, cheaper, more efficient, and that's where what we stand on, to be able to say, let's improve and strengthen the involvement of this young generation, the involvement of the everyday entrepreneur.
All right. Mr. Kawanguzi, the world is talking about AI, the Western world. What are we talking about here in Uganda? Can you share with us some innovations that you are actually working on as a group? Something that would actually move Uganda and say, indeed, in this knowledge-based economy, we are heading in the right direction. What are some of the solutions that we have seen?
The world is talking about AI. We're also talking about AI. That's the beauty with technology. It's an equalizer. And it can help us actually. That's why we're talking about a knowledge economy at the moment, because we don't have to be far off or separate from the world. At the moment, we are seeing so many young people who are building EV, electrical vehicles, and batteries, as solutions and startups, and contributing to to how mobility can be. How we can begin to solve the problem of mobility. But, if you look at, again, I keep going back to, the population, it's not just technology. The biggest percentage of this young population is also in the creative sector, in fashion, in film, in media, in entertainment. And I think the key job to do is unlocking the opportunity for them to not just be on the receiving side if things are good, but also participate in making things good.
All right. The minister threw to us a challenge to discuss where we can actually get money to actually make this budget tick, because he seems to suggest that this is a wish list. But there's been a feeling, especially when you hear people who talk budgets, indicating to us that we have a lot of money, but we are likely to be throwing it all around. And I'll come to you, Angela. Where can we get the money when you look at this budget? Is there wastage? Are there things that we should actually avoid to be able to provide for those unfunded priorities, looking at the state of affairs in our country?
Thank you. The minister will be very, very happy when he leaves Radio 1 tonight, because I'm going to point to him where the money is, and I'm very sure he knows where it is, but
he might not be
shy away from certain things. But I'm going to show him where the money is.
Show us the money.
Yes. But just before I go to show him where the money is, I just wanted to point out something. So in the budget, this debt thing has been recurring. So, and we are saying that the money that we have to pay, the money that we have to spend on debt repayment vis-a-vis the collections is grossly insufficient. That we are supposed to borrow again 40 trillion
to be able to pay.
To be able to pay. That is from internal and external sources. And I also want to look at how much and what that means to health, education, and social protection. when you see the whole percentage that debt repayment and servicing is taking up, it is 57% of the budget. And that is nothing compared to the entire investment that you need. I want to use the word investment. I don't want to use, what you have to spend, because me, I look at education as investment. What you have for education, healthcare, and social protection. But where the money is, I know that for a very long time, and our former PS, Keith Muhakanizi, may his soul rest in peace, many times said that things like pay are low-hanging fruit. And I think our government is lazy. They want the indirect taxes, and they don't know the impact of the indirect taxes. But there are things where we can get money. And one of the things is today, in one of the speeches, we started from the speeches, the permanent secretary, stroke secretary to the Treasury, Ramadan Gobi, talked about tax exemptions again and said tax exemptions are good for the economy. So he was bringing it in that light. But we have always argued, where is the evidence? Where is the cost-benefit analysis that has been done for you to tell us that tax exemptions are good? Can Ministry of Finance, because we need to utilize our government departments. You have Ministry of Finance, you have a whole National Planning Authority, with these economists and all that. They usually give the figures. Why can't we have the evidence? Let Ministry of Finance, they have hinted about it, but we want a cost-benefit analysis to show us, to point us to the evidence that actually tax exemptions are good. And it should be published, because it should be a public document and we are able to access it.
Probably that's why we are seeing there's so many factories coming up. People given incentives to actually invest more.
Yes, but when there are those exemptions, you're telling us they are good, because what we are looking at is how do we generate revenue domestically to be able to finance our budget. When you look at Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, so over 70% of their budget is from domestic revenue. Why can't we do it? I'm not talking about Denmark. I'm not talking about Sweden. I'm not talking about Netherlands. I'm talking about Tanzania, Kenya, Rwanda, that they have over 70% of their money that they're going to run their budget with from domestic resources. So if indeed tax exemptions are good, can we have that cost-benefit analysis? And we reason from a point of evidence. I think that is very key. Let us go to corruption. I think every Ugandan should get people in government. I don't know. Should we just give them a middle name called corruption? So in between your first name and the surname, we insert another name called corruption. Probably that will help us fight, because it is so glaring and it is so straining for someone who has to pay taxes, because we also have to look at URA. I actually feel bad for URA, and that is why they have to get all the anger, and they have URA officials have turned into military men. It's like you have to collect taxes on gunpoint. And why are we in that situation? The reason why we are in that situation is because we do not feel our taxes. The roads that we are traveling on, I have to pay for my child's education. I have to pay for health care. Basically, I'm on my own. Ugandans, we are on our own. So where do you get the incentive to pay tax? I think government should be. There used to be a very big billboard in Chaliwajala. And it was a URA billboard, and it was saying, because of your taxes, your children are now able to go to school. Because of your taxes, we have built the women's specialized hospital in Mulago. That is a debt, a banja that our grandkids are paying. So, in light of that, when I'm sick, I have to pay for my health care. It is out of pocket. Too huge. The schools, because of the limited investment, the money is not there. Let me just read from you the budget. When you look at the primary schools, so Ministry of Education had some projections, and they needed 100 billion shillings to rehabilitate 200 primary schools. And why they needed to rehabilitate those schools? These are schools, by the way, implementing universal primary education, something that we are proud of as a country. You know, we are leaders, you know, in sub-Saharan Africa and all that for, you know, universal. But I will tell you that currently 40% of the existing primary schools are in a bad shape. The buildings are dilapidated. But only 100 million. But when you go to the wasteful expenditure, Minister wanted where to get the money, wasteful expenditure. For the longest time, Kenneth, Ministry of Finance gives guidance when, you know, we are going into the budgeting process and says, reduce consumptive expenditure. But these things remain on paper. So in the current budget, there is 114 billion for travel abroad. We've seen ministers going with delegations. You see a delegation of 70 people, a delegation for going abroad. And I'll tell you that I've been to some of these meetings, and I'll tell you that most of the people on those teams, I don't think they even have a clue what they are going to do. But this is our money that they are taking, and you can't invest that money in UPE, but you can invest it in travel abroad. And that, can you just get a fraction of that and put some?
How do you want us to get best practices if we don't travel to go and see how it's being done in New York?
For the time that they have been traveling, what have we gotten from that? Where is the value? I'll tell you that in Tanzania, there is a time I met a lady somewhere, and she said that she almost missed her flight because she had to present documents at the airport, answer questions. She works at the university, a public university, why she was traveling and how that travel is going to help Tanzania. There is that scrutiny that they have to go through. You don't just travel. So there is a lot of, you know, leakage. And for the corruption, we are seeing, we live with it. It is in our faces. We see what is happening in Parliament. Even children in primary school now know what is happening in Parliament. So Parliament actually is becoming a very big problem for this country. And people are going to Parliament to enrich themselves. Their intention is, how do I get rich very fast? But they are not there to work for us, because Parliament is supposed to do oversight. So if Parliament was just able to do just half of what they are supposed to do, you know, they are supposed to do appropriation, you know, look at the budgets, scrutinize the figures, where is the money going, where is the most need. But it is not happening because they do not have our interests at heart. We are on our own.
All right. Dr. Walugembe, do you agree with Ms. Angella here that there are places where we can get the money? And she has given you a number of examples. Very quickly, we need to also hear from the minister to respond, because he is actually the one who put that question on the table.
No, on the issue of the money, we need to, first of all, reduce our expenditure. I'm not convinced that we need all the money to begin with, because we can't start from the presumption that we need 72 trillion. There's money that we can save, even in this budget, and because I need to, if I look at the money, particularly under science and technology and innovation, and I want to focus there, not because I don't like science, but because I think we can also deploy some of the resources that we have better. Under science and technology, for instance, we have this banana project that on average receives 50 billion shillings. It says it benefits 1,653 farmers. If you divide that, it means that these farmers are really benefiting a great deal. The benefit is, you know, it's too high. So, and they have been receiving for the last 10 years.
The presidential initiative
of banana development. We like it. We like it. Please don't. We like the project, but it must be viable. Every project must be viable. You cannot absorb 50 billion shillings and you say you have market, because in here they say they have global demand. No, fine. If you have global demand, the market,
serious production.
Yeah, but the taxpayer shouldn't bear that bill. And so these white elephant projects that are hiding under science, because science is a good thing.
Why don't you engage in banana production so that you feed that factory instead of saying it's a white elephant?
Because no, does it have market? It does not have. Where is the global demand for this
What
thing?
did he explain?
Let them borrow. Let them go and borrow, because if you have demand, you create a business plan and you go to the bank and you borrow. That's project one. The second project is this thing by Day Biopharma, where they are receiving 723 billion shillings to make vaccines. Which vaccines do we want? All the vaccines that we want are available globally. The process of approving a vaccine is long.
That's import substitution.
And now this
import substitution.
What import? For which disease?
We want
which
to use the money
vaccines?
that we are spending outside to buy
Which vaccines?
Yeah,
because I'm talking about human vaccines, cancer drugs, generic drugs. Let's not reinvent the wheel. So this is another. The other one is this anti-tick project that's receiving 25 billion. And the interesting thing, some of these funds are attached to individuals. Dr. X, 25 billion. Dr. Y, who received 2 billion. Dr. X, who received 25 billion. Look, my view is that we need to rethink around. We like the theme of science. We want to invest in science. As I said, I am a scientist myself, but we should not use science to clear things that, in my view, value for money. This gentleman, Dave Biopharma, what has he done? Where's the evidence at it? So for me, this I cannot accept in all good faith. This money we can reallocate. All right. If not, we can take out of the budget. Now, on the issue, first, you talked about where can we get the money. First, we can cut on expenditure. Number two, we can ensure that the little money we have, we deploy correctly. The issue of borrowing, yes, we can borrow, but from where? I would say let's borrow from concessional sources. If we can borrow from multilateral lenders, the better. They give us a grace period, they ask for low interest, and they give us technical assistance. If you are going to borrow from commercial banks, if you are going to borrow from all kinds of funny lenders, then we are going to get into debt distress and default.
All right. We have some observations coming in. Tax exemptions, when given, should be given to a sector, not individuals. There should be proof of job creation and production increase to be analyzed through payee returns and production figures of the tax-exempted companies. More comments. Good evening, Kenneth Luyera in Wakiso. I just wish to inform you that as we have this talk show, URA has built an office opposite Kikubo to monitor IFRIS. It's something traders must take care.
To handhold businesses, please.
That's another.
They're supposed to handhold
comment from the
businesses.
listener. Andre writes in and says, to close this budget debate, I would like to ask. To close this budget debate, I would like to ask the panelists: who of you runs their families on budgets you have drawn and you live within the budgets? As a country, we run a humanitarian budget, nothing financed unless it's urgent for the president's office or if the approvers are broke and want some money. Lorenzo writes in and says, when the financial year ends, June 2024, all unused money reverts to the consolidated account. Unfortunately, when coming up with the next budget, no mention is made about any balance carried down. Balance carried down is a standard practice in basic accounting. Who eats the returned money? Mr. Walugembe, please help the audience professionally on that issue. Then we have another comment. For us, primary and art secondary school teachers are mourning as scientists are the ones following the budget now. Though no industrial action this time, but it will be by our souls. That's another comment. It will be well with our souls. Then we have another comment, a very lengthy one here. The budget theme is about monetizing of the economy and to meet the objective, the rural economy, the objective, the rural sector has government support for the rural. The budget theme is about monetizing of the economy and to meet the objective, the rural sector has been given government support and in form of a MIOGA, PDM, and other intervention. This issue is what the issue is what mechanisms are there to monitor those programs to ensure that they meet their targets, and what are the targets to be achieved? In what time frame are these targets to be achieved and to meet the expectations of the budget? Apparently, the disbursement of the funds are reported to have been successfully accomplished. However, technological support. What technological support is there to ensure target achievement? Finally, the budget raid is suspected to have forged projections, given the allegations of the irregularities caused by some members of the Committee on the Budget. This has become a court matter, where prosecution might use these forgeries as prosecution evidence. What assurance are there that the budget is in line with Vision 2040 and the 5-year development plan? That's a comment from Elder Honorable Eresu John, who is listening in from Kabbyanga. Over to you, Honorable Minister, respond to some of the issues that have been put across, but you've been given assurances where we can get the money.
I thank all the people who have sent their responses. First of all, it's a clear manifestation that they are listening and following very well. And I would like to thank Angella for pointing out how we can save money. And I agree with her. And my brother here for also pointing out other areas where we can save money. But there is one thing. We are not going to avoid taxes, whether direct or indirect taxes. But the most important thing is to assure the people we are going to tax are earning. That's one of the most important things. Most of these countries which are prosperous, the taxes are high. But the most important thing is to assure the people who are going to be taxed are earning. Secondly, the taxes are properly utilized. I think that those are the two most important things.
And that brings in the aspect of corruption that
exactly.
most people are talking about.
What we are doing here, that's why I told you that the Minister of Finance put money in strategic areas, roads, energy, PDM, so that what if you invested in PDM and all these I don't want to say poor people, low income earners can also start earning. First of all, they produce, and this time they are not producing for the stomach alone, but they can produce and also sell and earn. It will improve their income, and it will also improve their purchasing power. They will be able now to buy from my brother
Kawanguzi.
Exactly, Kawanguzi. They will be able to buy from him, who is manufacturing.
And everybody is saying that's a good idea.
Exactly.
But the question is, how do you ensure that the money you're actually sending is put to proper use? That seems to be the problem. In the past, money was eaten.
Now that's where the problem is, and therefore now we need to solve the governance issues, because Uganda is not short of leaders. Actually, from LC1 to the president, we have about 2 million leaders. And I'm failing to understand why we can't supervise such a project which is bringing money to the lowest level. We have LCs, we have chairmen of parties, we have about 25 parties, 35. All of them have grassroots leaders. That's where we should all go, to ensure we supervise, all of us, and ensure that money is properly used to improve production. And I'm happy that the minister now has even put money in agro-industrialization, so that if this production is high, we should add value. Instead of selling maize grains to Kenya, at least we should sell what? Portion. And that's what we want.
And also make animal feed.
Yes, and also make animal feed. And that's why we need to invest money in the knowledge economy of Chico here, so that people can even know the weather patterns, they can know the soil patterns, and so that they don't just plant anything. The other time he was in Serena, Chigo, and he was training farmers. Yes, the digital economy, training farmers that please don't just go to plant anyhow. It was, I think, you were working with the massacre, and you could see farmers very happy, because they taught them how to also on their own estimate the weather patterns, and now they even taught them how to get the correct pesticides, how they can get it online. They even taught them how to get the best fertilizers. But you know, some people just buy fertilizer on the open market when probably it's not even compatible to what you're going to what?
To the soils.
What you're putting in the soils. So all those are things which we should really concentrate on. But and I'm not also worried about borrowing. Just as my brother here has said, we need to go for concession what? Loans. That one I accept. But also we should, when we borrow, we should put this money in productive what? Productive sectors.
Is that what you're doing now?
Yes. That's why we are borrowing for roads, for energy. So that, and some of you, even if we borrow for security, you say, no, security, no. Security is very, very important. Nobody can produce when there is what? Is security. But what I'm saying,
saying that absence of war does not mean peace. You should also solve the other issues.
We shall come to that. But if we can borrow and invest it properly, we shall gain. If we can borrow and we use that money for what it has been borrowed for, it will be okay. If we can borrow and utilize that money in record time, it will also be what? Okay. The problem will be you borrow and then you spend 3 years without utilizing the money. And then you start paying what?
We have heard about that already.
Yes,
now happening.
I think that's where the problem is. So, in addition to what she was talking about, those are also sources of what? Of problems, leakages. And that's why, because if you can borrow and put it in strategic investment, within 5 years, you will see results. And even you will start paying the loans without a lot of what?
Pressure.
A lot of pressure.
All right.
Obviously, tax exemptions are very, very important.
Let's dig the tax exemptions when we return from this break, because it's an interesting place. Some people actually suggesting the formula that we should use. We should be able to follow up those that have received tax exemptions to ensure that they're actually delivering on what they promised to do at the time they were. Even the bailouts, giving individuals money instead of giving to sectors where there are so many people. Well, stay tuned to Radio 1 FM 90. Spectrum Extra continues after this break.
Spectrum Extra, Fridays 7 to 9 p.m. on Radio 1 FM 90.
Well, thank you so much for staying with us on Spectrum Extra Review, the major events of the week. Our focus is on the 2024-2025 national budget, but also the speech delivered by President Yoweri Museveni through the Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development, Matia Kasaija, yesterday. My guest this evening, the Honorable Godfrey Kabbyanga, the State Minister in charge of National Guidance, Government of the Republic of Uganda, Ms. Angella Kasule Nabowe, Executive Director at the Initiative for Social and Economic Rights, ISA, who are members of the Civil Society Budget Advocacy Group, where she is also a board member, Dr. John Kakungulu Walugembe, Economist and Executive Director at the Federation of Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises of Uganda, and Mr. Japheth Chiko Kawanguzi, Team Leader at the Innovation Village, who are the trailblazers in innovation and the knowledge economy in Uganda. My name is Kenneth Lukwago Anderson, your host. Please keep your comments coming via the WhatsApp line, which is 0703-090-090. Help us to shape the discussion here in studio. Now, gentlemen and ladies, let's focus a little bit on this issue of tax exemptions and tax holidays and their relevance to the economy of Uganda. And I'll begin with you, Dr. Walugembe. We know the argument the government has put across. We are competing for investors with other countries. We should therefore provide incentives to win that race, get more investors here, create jobs, expand the economy, collect more taxes, and work on the challenges that this country faces. But now we continue to hear people are saying it's time to rethink some of these incentives. What's your take there?
Well, the argument is correct that when you're attracting investors, you must offer something in return as a destination, because other countries do the same. So since 1991, government rolled out a generous regime to attract investors. Over time, there were complaints, of course, and what government did was to institutionalize it within the tax code. So it means that most of those incentives are accessible, particularly tax incentives, are accessible by every Ugandan who is able to read the tax code and take advantage of it. And if you look at the tax code, for instance, it will support businesses in agriculture. Why? Because government prioritizes that sector. Now, there has also been abuse in the sense that some people are given far and beyond what is available within the code, or people simply abuse the code to benefit very many times. So I start a business, I benefit after 10-year tax holiday, I start another business, I come back as investor. Why? This kind of abuse, and I think that's what we should. And then the incentive should be given out based on clear performance metrics. How many jobs are you going to create? What are you going to contribute to the economy? And so on. The challenge we have with most of our investors is that they literally come with nothing. You know, investors are supposed to come with money, with technology, or expertise. In most cases, they come with nothing. And I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example of Aya. Aya came, he received land, he went and borrowed from the Industrial Development Corporation in South Africa. He borrowed $67 million. He was unable to pay. They are demanding 624, and government is considering to pay for him. So this
when
gentleman,
the government pays, does it
so
take
this
over?
gentleman has really taken us for a ride, in my view. He basically bought nothing and has benefited from the an extremely generous regime here. Then the other issue, so this is just one example. And then we have this issue of bailouts. You know, I borrow money, I'm unable to pay, and then someone bails me with 200 billion. We must have, if we think we must bail out businesses, let us start an entity, the Uganda Bailout Company. Any business, a micro business, a small business that feels that they are struggling and in need of bailout, can go and put in the application. Even if you need a bailout of 500,000, we want to make sure that this is a fair process. Then we have this issue of grants. There are people who also benefit from pure grants. They are not bailouts, they are not tax holiday, they are just grants. We must institutionalize all this. Now, on the issue of, going back to the issue of tax incentives and investors and so on, I do not believe, and a lot of our civil society actors, Oxfam and so on, have been doing studies, we need to eliminate tax holidays and tax incentives. I think they are important. They are an important instrument in the economy. However, we must ensure that they are not abused, and we must ensure that they are accessible to all. We shouldn't promote them in such a way that they only favor a few. So, for instance, if government is giving out a square mile of land, where do I apply? How do I access as John? If I need to access 500 billion, I have a brilliant idea. Where do I go? And I think this is what we are saying. The same with all these funds that we have either for science. If I'm a scientist and I have something new, where do I go? Where is the fund that I apply to? So for me, the point is,
How about you,
these incentives? It's a loan. These guys who are getting money, these are not loans. They are just getting money to research. Someone's getting 25 billion to research. So if John, as a good scientist, I have an idea, I have a new tick vaccine, where do I take my application? So that in the next budget, I'm also allocated 30 billion. Yes.
Well, that's just for Mr. Kawanguzi.
Yeah,
As a private sector player.
I think I like where John is going with that. And for me, like I said, I'm really coming to this from the optimistic point of view. Because typically, incentives, where innovation has taken off, government has a strategic role they can play in what we call market creation. Where, as a private sector, it doesn't make business sense for us to invest. We expect, government to be the leader in opening up those markets. And what normally happens is when the government invests in a sector that is not necessarily lucrative for the private sector, it leads to what we call, spin-off technologies. Like when space technology was invested in, we got so many other innovations and ideas that came as a result of that seed investment. It ends up creating a market and a market opportunity. So I don't necessarily have a problem with the level of investments and the amounts that are going into what he called the white elephants. What we need to think about is two things. One is, how do we involve these young innovators in those value chains. Because if it is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 projects, then it's going to leave many behind.
Right. We are looking at incentives for investors. You, as people who are in the innovation sector, are you getting the incentives? There's been a complaint there about how local investors are not actually supported.
Yeah.
Are you getting the incentives? Because innovation, and even I have heard about so many Ugandans who have innovations, but taking them to the market phase is the problem.
I think, and that's why the reason I'm also here, it's really the sector is growing and growing fast, but struggling. So we need to, first of all, elevate and identify its contribution to economic growth, and say, here is how many jobs we are creating, here is how many young people are involved in this, here is how many young people are creating jobs for other young people within the sector, for it to then get that level of recognition.
All right. Let's now move on and tackle some of the key challenges this budget is likely to face. But I will also give the opportunity to the Minister to respond on these issues of innovation and whether they are thinking of, on these issues of exemptions, and whether they are actually thinking about whether they are actually reconsidering, taking into account the views that are coming from different people on how to deal with the issue of innovation. Maybe let's begin there before we actually look at the challenges that await this budget, among which is corruption, an issue that I want us to look at conclusively. Honourable Minister, on the issue of exemptions, are you doing anything, or are we still going to remain in the same direction? Some people say you're throwing money around, bailing out people. Somebody starts their company, they go without consulting any ordinary Ugandan who pays the taxes. They take a loan, they fail. Sometimes even because of the way they are managing their business, they collapse, and then the taxpayers are shouldering that burden of actually paying that particular loan. The question is, do we take over that business as the government of Uganda? Do we get even shares? Who accounts for that money that you're bailing out, that you're using to bail out businesses? That should at least be left to phase out because of the practices of the owners likely.
First of all, tax exemptions, just as Mr. Walugembe has stated, it's not something new. It's actually policy of it's out of policy of government. At one time, we wanted to attract investors, and the only thing we could do is to give tax exemptions, tax holidays, and other incentives like giving land in the industrial parks. And so far, it has earned us a lot. If you go to Namamve, you will see so many factories that have come up, and indeed, we can now export several items. We are able now to export cement. We are able to export sugar. We are able to export soap. We can export several products now because of some of those incentives. Yes, there are some investors. Obviously, investors are not at the same level. There are some investors who are investors in what? In quotes. But you cannot say all investors are bad. Not at all. We have really attracted a lot of investment. If you go to Kabbyanga, you will see a whole industrial park. If you go to Mbale, you will see a whole industrial park producing so many things. Tiles, for instance, in Kabbyanga, they are on the market, and they have really competed favorably with the tiles which were imported. So let us also say that there is some positive. Something positive that has come out of tax exemptions and tax holidays. Something positive. But obviously, at some extent, some of the exemptions might have been abused. That one is there. And that is because of corruption, which we have all accepted. That is it's now number one problem that we have in this country. But we cannot say all tax exemptions, tax holidays have really gone so bad.
The bailouts.
When it comes to these bailouts, some of the bailouts are strategic bailouts. For instance, if I want you to visit this, what is it called, Diapharm, that factory, which is supposed to produce vaccines and and drugs and whatever, both human drugs and whatever. It's a huge investment, and this man had struggled alone, but he reached somewhere. I think, you know, if you're in business, all business you see on earth is taking a risk.
Honorable Minister, where that man reached, the last time I saw the president there laying a foundation stone, there were no structures, and I think we are just giving him money to actually start the construction. So it's the government of Uganda that is actually funding the project.
Kenneth,
it's just like Lubowa Hospital.
Kenneth,
somebody comes with an idea. And
I'll not talk about Lubowa.
Without money.
Concentrating on
it's almost the same thing.
This is there from something. I just want you to give me a moment one day, and we go there. The man had done something, and he was moving by a farmer and whatever. There was he had progressed, but I think he reached somewhere where he got hard up and asked for government assistance, and it is a strategic.
So how does that
intervention?
How does that government assistance?
They can borrow from you.
How do we account for that?
Yeah, they can.
How do we account for that government assistance? Do we get the shares?
Valuable business
do we own the factory? What do we get there?
The government can
Because the government represents us.
Give you a subsidy. So long as strategically they have seen that with the time they are going to do what? To benefit. And for instance, the tick vaccine, Ms. Walugembe. The tick vaccine, it is something which was developed by Makerere University, and it has been tested. Now it is at development level. So why don't we give them money and we stop importing tick vaccine? Sincerely, that one. There are some interventions which are strategic, and I feel they should do what? They should be supported. Though there might be others which might have problems, and all that is because of corruption. There are some which might. But these two, I really feel they are very strategic interventions, and I can't blame anybody for coming in to assist them. I have brothers. Obviously, just as I've told you, you know me, I've been a businessman since I was 14. Yes. And since I was 14, because me, I come from the border.
Yes.
And the only time I have done business without borrowing is when I was probably from 14 to around 20, because I was smuggling. And smuggling, you can't borrow, because you don't know whether you will.
No record.
Yes, vinegar means the gym. That was the in thing. You were smuggling coffee, fuel, everything at the border, and you couldn't borrow because you didn't know whether you are going to what.
You were busy sabotaging a means economy.
Exactly. But after, when the system became thorough, I can't do business without what? Borrowing. And every businessman is a risk venture.
That's true.
So I came in and went and borrowed and sang money in a hotel. It was a risk venture. And he was one of our big investors who came at a time when very few people would invest in Uganda. But now he has a big problem.
Big in which way? We gave him free land.
Yes.
We had to move the Uganda Broadcasting Studios from Nakasero to pave way for that particular project.
Yes.
He wasn't that big investor.
Yes, and eventually he ran into problems. So if he has run into problems and he wants to say, please, I need money, and I think when the government gives him the money, then they take over the what? The property.
Why doesn't he look at other financiers, people who can come and buy a stake in his business to keep the business afloat? Why does it have to be all the time? Not only Aya, there are even other people within the Ugandan private sector.
Kenneth,
why do they have to go to government?
Kenneth, when we were in business, when you have problems, even friends run away. And at the time you need, when you have a problem, everybody actually will come in knowing that you have a what?
So, Honorable Minister,
so even if they come in, even if they want to buy you,
how do you comfortably sit down and tell Ugandans that you do not have money to provide them drugs, to provide them quality education, when there's somebody probably running a risky business where you're sinking billions of shillings collected from taxpayers.
No,
How do you account for the social contract?
when we take over, for instance, that hotel, it will improve tourism.
Are you sure?
And the money will come.
Are you sure?
The money will come.
Are you sure you're going to
And
take
then
over?
we get money to buy what? To buy drugs. You know now, Kenneth, you are just looking at the negative side
I'm not
of
looking at
things.
the negative side.
You should also start looking at the positive side of what.
Of course, the question I'm asking is whether you'd actually take over.
Yes. Obviously, if we pay him off, then we take over. Yes, and we
I think you should take over first.
oh, yes,
then
we can take over and put it under management.
All right.
Contract of another businessman.
All right.
Because government is not interested now in doing business.
All right.
Yes.
Time is out of our side, but we need to tackle this issue of corruption as a major challenge to the budget. And I'll begin with you, Ms. Angella. You partly hinted on this issue. The budget affected by corruption. We are told actually annually we lose about 10 trillion shillings. We were at one point told about what they call budgeting for corruption, where there was an intended plan actually to put money in the budget, which would then be shared out. Only for the president recently to actually tell us there is a syndicate between the Minister of Finance, accounting officers, and Parliament. And we're seeing some MPs actually being prosecuted because they wanted allegedly to take about 20% of a budget of a statutory body. That's the Uganda Human Rights Commission. Why are we failing to tackle corruption, Ms. Angella?
I think since we are discussing budget, we need to go back to fiscal discipline. We have a very good law in the name of the Public Finance and Management Act. It is a very good law. But it is also being abused. It is being rendered useless. And as long as that is the status quo, we are not going to get in. Actually, the corruption starts from disregarding a legal framework. So don't be surprised, Kenneth and the listeners, that when we start implementing the financial year 2024-2025 budget, 1st July, that you can even see a supplementary budget in July. It is because we are shameless, as you know, people are shameless now in government. You know, you make these laws and then you disregard them. So they use the supplementary budgets also as a conduit to get out money from the system. So that is all corruption. So one of the things that we have to do is we have to go back to the drawing board. If we have to do sessions for members of parliament and teach them again, and people, you know, planners in government departments, ministries and agencies, to go, you know, to teach them what we have, that we have this law called the Public Finance and Management Act, and it says A, B, C, D. Because even right from what we are struggling with, how the budget shoot up to 72 trillion, it is because of that last minute that was brought in, which doesn't actually follow the law, because it should be around errors, omissions, but it's complete. When you go inside and what was brought at the last minute, it is disregarding the law. So I think we need to be able to respect the laws and be able to implement them, and that alone, if we did that, we would be able to get somewhere. But also the other thing around corruption is that we need to understand the cost of corruption to this country. What is the cost of corruption? And a number of people, agencies have been coming up, you know, to do that analysis, to see what we actually lose when money is lost like that. I think we need to intensify that. But also the other thing that we should be looking at as citizens of Uganda is to look at elections. To look at, you know, for instance, service delivery as an election issue. So you do all the mess, but you shouldn't be coming back to us to ask for a vote to put you back in power. Elections are coming up. We should be able to use we should be able to use education, healthcare, social protection as an election issue. And we do not want people coming us, you know, speaking in tongues when we ask them the real questions. I think as Ugandans, the other way of fighting corruption is to be able to make these issues as an election issue because it is so disturbing. The other thing around corruption, I think URA should interest itself in this, why they are having trouble collecting taxes and why they are becoming beasts and everyone is looking at them as monsters. It's because we don't see any value of paying taxes as Ugandans. We are being cheated in broad daylight. So it's like the money that we pay in taxes is like money it's like throwing money in a latrine. So as long as that is the status quo, and Honorable Minister, please, when you go back to Cabinet, please tell the President and your fellow ministers that we Ugandans are very good people. We actually want this country and we want it to develop. But the reason why URA is struggling to collect taxes and has to move with people who look like, it is because we don't see any value. And this corruption is all around us. And we feel so sad. It is so painful when we see the money that is being siphoned. I have seen the letter that has been written by Honorable Anite about the money that officials of Uganda Investment Authority awarded themselves. And like when we see these things, it is very painful for us. Very, very painful. So when you sit in Cabinet, please tell the President that we are good Ugandans. We are very good people. But it is because we don't see any value. The roads are so bad. Actually, just even you start with your own car, the amount of money we pay, the taxes that are determined by you that you pay on your car, and then you're going to drive on that Najera road. You drive and you're feeling the pain like this, and you're like, I wish I could just find a minister. The pain is too much.
And you struggle him.
Yes, I'm struggling.
Well, let's hear from you, Dr. Walugembe, the issue of fighting corruption.
No, Kenneth, just one thing.
Unfortunately, we're running out of time.
I just wanted to also point to the minister that as the Initiative for Social and Economic Rights, we have published a paper on how to finance, for instance, public services. And we have some key facts, figures, for instance, the money that we lose through illicit financial flows, the money that the multinationals take out. All that money could help us finance our budget, and then you do not have to take us into this debt trap. There are those leakages that we can, stop.
Give me a copy.
All right.
I'll give you a copy.
Seconds as we come to the end of the show, Dr. Walugembe.
I think the politicians have excelled in misusing our money, but we are also not innocent, because I also see that Uganda, as Ugandans, we're also becoming corrupt in other areas. We can point fingers at the politicians, but we're also not doing any better. Because the other day I heard that in church someone collected, it was a service, they were collecting condolences, and the reverend gave 10% of what was collected. So you see that this, we need to look at our moral fabric, and Honorable Minister, you are in charge of national guidance. This is something we ask of you to take very serious. Guide the nation so that we are able to behave in a more moral way out.
All right, Mr. Kawanguzi, as we come towards the end of the show, your closing remarks?
I think for me, my closing remarks is really the creation of more entrepreneurs in this country is something we need to look closely at. If you look at the latest tax data to see how many people are able to pay, taxes, whereas the number of businesses that are able to pay above 100 billion or that make 100 billion came from 125 to just 6. We also saw an increase in the small, medium enterprises and entrepreneurs. So there is a lot of work we need to do to build a better ecosystem for them.
All right, Honorable Minister, you'll have the final.
I think,
on the issue of
thank you,
corruption.
Kenneth, and all my fellow panelists. First of all, I think we all agree that we need physical discipline. 100%. We have now laid the budget. We need to follow it. Fiscal discipline is very, very important. 2, we all agree that the cost of production is hurting the economy. Because 2022, the IGG was talking about 10 trillion. We need to reduce on that. But we also agree that there is a giver and a taker. All of us are to blame for that corruption. We also, but I would like also to tell Angela
All right.
that we are not throwing money in the lottery. No.
Okay.
But lastly, Kenneth, the URA office in Chikubo was requested by the
For
people
IFRI's
of
purposes.
It's correct.
All right.
For IFRI's
I agree with you
purposes.
that.
To handhold them.
To handle.
Yeah.
All right, I'm afraid time is not our best ally. I must thank you very much, my dear panelists, for actually making time to be with us. And thank you very much, dear listeners, for tuning in and sharing with us on this platform. From us here in studio and the entire production crew, we wish you a good weekend.
Spectrum Extra on Radio 1 FM 90. An extra hour of analysis and discussion on the topical issues of the week. Brought to you by Housing Finance Bank, a financial institution regulated by Bank of Uganda. Housing Finance Bank, we make it easy.
The views expressed on this show are not necessarily those of this radio station or its management.